Welcome to Conscious I, living in authentic connection and harmony with self, others, and the world, featuring Ravi and Savitri. Good morning, Ravi.
Good morning. This is your day. I'm excited.
This is my day. Yes, I have to tell you that this whole concept of resilience as uh, sacred evolution has been a really deep study spiritually. Just considering it every day and thinking about the episode we had last week where you introduced it and brought the natural cycles and how we align with that. And that's given me an opportunity to really begin to bring some more of that into my life. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to hear. Yeah, that was a fun one.
So today we're going to also experience that. Um, and there are a couple things about this topic that we may have to dig into the roots just for a moment about. One is that we are ultimately going to be looking at the humanities, art, music, dance, our culture, writing, theater, all of the expressive arts that we as humans either enjoy or participate in, and thinking of those in a way that they are building blocks for resilience. They're ways that we can drop in and add resilience to our life. One of the things that I found, though, as I started looking at it, is that there's been a lot of research done because we have music therapy, we have art therapy, we have meditation therapies, we have journal writing in therapies. And so when I started looking at the arts as a way of holding, maintaining, and building resilience and dropping back into it after trauma, which we won't go into today, but burnout is a trauma, and we're going to cover that at some point. There were a few things that came up in lots of information. So I landed on the three pillars of resilience. And in order to get to those three pillars, the how to we hold resilience, how we build resilience, we first start thinking about, do we have it? How do we get it? Why can two people experience the same environment, the same events, and have a completely different experience? And we know about that from trauma. But we also are beginning to learn more about it with resilience. And so, of course, there are lots of tests and quizzes and other things that have been developed and studied, and the data's been analyzed and peer review and all of that. But I want you to know that it's become a real important way to look at how people are living their lives on a daily basis. And especially now, I think it's so important because we have this chaotic, unprecedented socio-political environment that is changing the way we show up and what may be draining us or fulfilling us.
Real quick,
Yeah.
unprecedented for us, the socio-political environment, which I think is an important nuance just because, well, there I'm like, but because we can look to others who have experienced this and we can learn from that experience, or we can learn from our past. So it is new to us and unprecedented for us, but let's also be cognizant of whose shoulders we stand on
Yes.
and how we can look to them
Mm-hmm.
as we move forward. As I inserted myself into your,
No,
but
this is exactly the first pillar. And the first pillar really has to do with how we view and engage with an experience. And the interesting thing about resilience is that it's not a fixed characteristic. Like we think of some of our personality characteristics, well, that's the way we are. We can modify them a little bit or maybe do a few changes here and there. But resilience ebbs and flows. It's like a watery element that flows through us, a lot like emotions. So it is attached to an emotional response. And so it's how we experience it. And then the one that you were talking about is what kind of support system do we have? When we do have low resilience, what does that look like? And how does that show up for us? I think in one of our episodes, you'd said something at one point about just bucking up, or I'm not sure how you
Or
phrased it.
pull yourself up by your
Yeah,
bootstraps,
that's what you
those
said.
very
Yeah,
things
yeah.
that we're hearing a lot of, or as it's even been said by very popular people in the zeitgeist, get up and work. It's like, hey,
Right.
we're all working to survive here is what it feels like. So
Yeah, so you might have a lot of people around you that recognize you have low resilience, and we'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say they're trying to help, but sometimes some of the things that show up that way aren't always exactly helpful and may feel a little more draining, actually, than where you might be. So when we think about, resilience is an adaptation process. So what do we do to adapt? Well, we go through a realization and an awareness that something is happening. Either we're feeling encouraged with agency and confidence or not. All of those things at the other end of the continuum. And so when we come up to a difficult situation, there may be an opportunity for us to just go ahead. We might be crisis managers where we kick into gear when something comes up that might be challenging. And you might not know that until you're actually in it and you feel like you have a lot of agency and you're able to handle it. But the other thing I found that was really interesting is that they're finding that resilience not only can be cultural and epigenetic based on the stories and the genetics that come through whatever lineage you're from, but about half the population doesn't have that. And so now we need to think about what does that mean for those that apparently have a little more resilience just naturally. They're born with it, and the ones that are not. So the ones that are not are the ones that often are the ones that are in a state where once they realize that they just can't go on, you start talking to yourself. I'm done. I can't go on. This is more than I really want to deal with. I need a vacation. You say all those things to yourself that are really signals, and there are probably many, many other statements. All of you are thinking the ones that show up for you, that guide us, are giving us little glimpses and poking us and saying, oh, come on, now you need to either rest or go on that vacation or do something that's going to nourish and bring you into being. So you and I have talked about practices a lot, and learning to enjoy the practice, come to the practice to fully engage. And when it becomes a daily circumstance, part of your routine, we might run the risk of it thinking, oh no, it's time for practice. That's not going to build resilience. Resilience is when we walk towards something with an open heart and an open mind and take a deep breath into it and then exhale.
yeah, that really feeds into you mentioned the difference between some people seem to have it innately, but you also mentioned the idea of support. I was That's so huge. Like we give up when we feel like nothing matters.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is your environment from day one, you know, even from when you cry out as a baby, you know, or you're not getting, don't have community support, when you just keep getting met with, you know, battle after battle, challenge after challenge, and you feel like there's no support to help lift you up, you know, it can, that really can dampen our our resilience. And if that happens at an early age, so as you, but as you also said, we can cultivate it too. So those practices can help change that. But it's, you know, it's moving, being able to move forward with an open heart, which if that's been battered all your life, that's where it's become such a challenge. That really just stood out.
Yeah, and getting down into the roots, one of the roots that's involved in that, actually, there are two, is judgment
Mm-hmm.
and detachment.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I'm talking about is detaching from judgment. So, they're working together in harmony, hopefully, where you may find that others are judging. What you felt was something that built resilience for you. And then those voices come inside. And from a young age, as you mentioned, often that shows up. You see children singing a song or bringing forward a drawing that they made to an adult. And the adult may, oh, that's nice. Or, did you ever think about doing this instead and trying to own it? And all of those things then drain the whole concept of the arts as being a way to become resilient. So those that go into the arts for performance, you have a different mindset. You know what that is. And when I was in that world in music, one of the things that was said to me by a very good friend said, you know, you have loved music all your life. It's been an outlet, it's been an expression, it's been a resource, it's been a refuge, all those things. This person knew me pretty well and said, as soon as you start performing and start analyzing your music, it's going to be different. And so that happens as well. So when we come into the arts as a way to be resilient, we have to um, suspend belief about the result. It's about the moment of expression, whatever that may be. You might sit down with an instrument and just not even think about whether it's creating a melody or a rhythm or anything. It's just truly something that's coming out. That's different. That's when we're building resilience. You may walk up to a canvas and you just go, I don't care what color I'm going to use. And if they all mix together, no worries. And you just put it on the canvas and it shows up. And it drips and it forms and it dries funny. And you say, now funny would be the judgment word, but it's all about what happens in the moment. So the arts can be a little tricky, which is why in a therapeutic environment, there's a guide. There is someone who's trained to help bring you out of that judgment, to allow you to detach in a way that it becomes healing and builds resilience. It's a catharsis. And the journal writing, I know, is another opportunity. And I'll just admit, it doesn't work for me very well, and never has. And I've tried it because I'm always getting stuck on, was that really the word that I want to use? And I stop and I think, and so I'm trying to be very perfect about the words that show up on the page. That may come from a Virgo moon. I will have to admit that. And it's easier for me to come into that state of true expression with music or art. So all of us are different. And I know you journal a lot, Ravi. Um, what kinds of emotions or experiences are you having? Or does it vary?
It's a completely, I don't know if I, and here I go right into it. I don't think I journal right. Judgment. I have a book I love, but I keep a book that it's because it's not a disciplined practice for me, which I guess, every practice doesn't have to be. It's more
Hmm.
of a spontaneous practice for me. It's consistent in that I've been doing it for a very good chunk of my life over time. It's never something that completely falls off. But it's, I like to get a blank notebook and I like to draw and add stickers and, maybe there's a to-do list in there, but maybe there's also some profound shit. I go back and read it and I'm like, I wrote that? Like, dang girl. Okay. So, that's what it's like for me. I notice though, what I also see in myself, like, you know, it's just funny how sometimes the ideas that we have of ourselves are not exactly the expression of ourselves, and you don't
True.
really notice
That's the
it for a
point.
long time. And I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, I'm so, I like being artistic. This journaling does help me get comfortable with just, let me just start drawing something and see what comes out, or practicing a certain shape or letting myself play with it and get better. And again, sometimes I look back at my drawings and I'm like, oh, wow,
Hmm.
crazy.
Hmm.
I didn't know I could do that. Um, and then another thing I'm just noticing, my studio office room is kind of had for a year plus has become a storage space of tools and whatnot as I did home renovation. And as that's cleared up, I'm still procrastinating on doing something because it means I have to now decorate that space or create that space. And I don't want to mess it up and do it wrong. So let's just leave the paint supplies there and then I don't have to worry about messing it up and doing it wrong because it's this holding space. So that may be a pattern in myself.
That's interesting that you brought in the home environment as a creative outlet because uh, we know that every time we visit someone's home, there's an ambience that you pick up, and we get
Oh,
that
it's such
in different
a reflection.
spaces. Yeah,
Yeah.
and restaurants have a vibe, and everywhere you go, there is a vibe, and that's a lot like an astrological chart. The different signs and houses all have vibes, but um, I'll dive into that another time. But when we think about it, it's interesting that you say what you're saying about procrastinating because I can have a blank canvas, actually, I still do, up on an
Hmm.
easel in a place with things set up all around it, ready to go. I won't even tell you, it's been there at least 12 months. And so, what's the holdup? I don't know. Maybe I have other things to do. That's a good excuse. Or maybe it's just not the right time internally to bring something out. That's probably more likely. Uh, and the interesting thing about the home decoration is that it feels really permanent, even though it's not. I mean, you just went through a bunch of renovations, you changed a lot of things. So that concept of judgment is showing up. And
Right. Oh yeah, got to do it right. If I'm not going to do it right, or if it might turn out wrong, then, well, if I never do it, then it can't turn out wrong. So let's just leave it in as this state of being.
mhm.
And eventually, you make a change and you're like, oh, I lived through that experience. Okay, that looks better. I moved these out of the way, or I put this on the wall, or I did this or that. So it's interesting how I can had to confront myself. You wouldn't think something like a home renovation, would be an existential study or whatever, but I kept meeting myself after every a completion of one little thing oh, that's all wrong. That wasn't how I envisioned it. Oh, it's all over. And then, the next thing, is, oh, wow, that looks pretty good. Okay. And now the finished product, I'm in love with it. And if I would have relaxed and trusted through the process and not worried about everything matching and being perfection. And it's strange because I don't consider myself that type of person. Yet through that experience, that's where I kept meeting myself and
Mhm.
seeing that pattern. So where else is that going on in my life? And I think that's just what life is a continuing unveiling of who we are and meeting ourselves and seeing ourselves and not realizing, oh, that was me all along. So
Mhm.
it's just another example of that in my experience.
Yeah, the home decorating thing. I don't think I've ever thought about it this way, but just listening to you talk about it, I get busy in renovations and upgrades when I want to do it for someone else to like it, and I might be selling. I'm not saying I'm selling. That's not the announcement at the moment. But when I think back now about how I could live with unfinished projects in
Mhm.
different homes that I've lived in. And when I start thinking about getting the projects done, the first thing that comes to mind is, well, let's see, I would do this if I would stay here forever, but I might want to resell this, in which case somebody else might like it better this way. And so I'm never really expressing myself in that capacity. And I might be doing that in some other things too, having
Yeah,
to do with my
yeah.
art. And actually, the
Hmm.
visual arts are easier for me because I'm never going to show them to anybody. I mean, that's not what I do. Um, Music was a little different because it was out in public for a duration of my life. And so there was always the idea of, I really like this way, but everybody else who might want to be hearing it would like this instead. And so there was always that give and take with the others. With my art, I don't have that. So now I have to contemplate. Maybe I'll keep you updated on it. Why I have an empty canvas still sitting there when it's really just for me and not for anyone else. So when we think about the arts and resilience, I think the key there is judgment and detachment. And being able to truly just express yourself, knowing that the result is whatever it is, and that is what shows you, gives you a mirror to your soul, at least in those moments. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it is. It is just that reflection of life is messy.
Yes, it
Nobody
is.
has it down. Nobody has it figured out. And if they're selling you the idea that they do, it's snake oil. Because we're all flying by the seat of our pants here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about, like you said, it's the lens through which you view every experience and how you pivot and adapt to
Mm-hmm.
that experience. If it's not going the way or direction you want, well then what what maybe could you pivot and do a little differently, or could you adapt uh, and see things a little differently and maybe shift your inner perspective and things on the outside change. It's that whole
Mm-hmm.
inner outer axiom that we're all familiar with.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that is an axiom because it's true, as pat as it can sound. Sometimes when you're in the thick of it and not wanting to, you just want everything to change around you so that it's better, you know. But I love that we're talking about that through expression, through just play, and the arts are something that, that's one of the first things that's squashed when you're trying to control people or
Mm-hmm.
oppress
Mm-hmm.
people, because
Yeah,
that's
we're
our,
seeing that now, aren't we? Yeah, taking ownership of
so,
places that
right. Well,
slowly
and
fading. Mm-hmm.
we're in a place where there's a lot of challenge to how we perceive art with AI coming up on the scene.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to talk about that a little more next week for our episode next week. Not a lot, but just touch on it.
It's
But
important. It's
it
definitely a
is.
thing.
It's
Mm-hmm.
because it's it's our, and for some people that's going to be like the shiny new toy, and there's a lot of capability within that, and as you know, there's a lot of damage that can be caused through our exploration into the most shiny new innovations as well. So there's always a balance that needs to occur.
Mm-hmm.
But the arts are our freedom of expression, of putting ourselves out into the world, showing the world who we are, and reflecting that to each other, back and forth, so that we can more clearly perceive our reality. It's a shared reality. It's this collective hallucination, and when you're taking this in a bubble, it can be a very skewed reality. Or as Neptune goes retrograde, as we have to really go internal inside to ground into what maybe is really real. But
Yeah.
also, well, I guess, that we take that, like everything on the spectrum, if we take that too far, we can become lost in our own delusions. We have to kind of look back at the external world and reflect and see, is this, you know, um, also a balanced view of myself? So it's that, we can't exist in a vacuum, and our ability to express and share who we are through the visual arts, through our writing, through the music and frequencies that we share with each other, is just part of our evolution as, um, you know these little beings of humans that we are.
And that's one of the reasons why we decided to do a series like this, so that we could each have some moments to really reflect and share. And the podcast was a derivation of that for us, is
Mm-hmm.
that it's an expression of
Mm-hmm.
um, of who we are and who the collective is from our perspective. But at the same time, I think others hold that perspective. And it's interesting you brought in the community part, because that's big. That's really huge. To be able to go out and share and see and experience art is, again, an expression of resilience. We don't always have to be the creator. We can explore and experience the art in a way that's extremely personal, but also with a recognition that it belongs to a bigger community than just us. And some of the resources that I talked about today came from an article that was published through the University of Birmingham. And just to close, there are four uh, recommendations that they brought forward: is to build resilience, foster long-term funding and collaboration. So that gets into the community and the support and the recognition that it is a key feature of being human, whether we do it for ourselves or whether we do it to share with others. And then it promotes transformational change. So if you look at the different the evolution, the sacred evolution of art and music and dance and theater, you see the stories of our culture. And one of the interesting philosophical topics that show up in a lot of um, uh, courses having to do with coming into a framework to be an artist, a musician, and someone involved in theater or dance is, do we mirror culture, or is culture mirroring us? And personally, I think it's a symbiotic relationship. where we feed from the culture and we feed to the culture, giving and taking, receiving and growing. And it brings us all into a greater expansiveness as to who we are and how we see ourselves. And then it definitely is a way to start thinking about, let's develop some indicators. How is resilience going? And I think you and I are in this podcast world because we realize that resilience as something that sustains humanity is in a state, and I'll just say a state, and we can all figure out where that state might be for us individually, but we know collectively there are changes happening. And whether you choose those changes or they're being brought upon, it brings something to us that will either enhance our resilience or drain it. So that's important to start understanding when those things occur. And the final one is the emphasis that you brought forward on community-centric resilience. How are our communities doing? What's going on? Where are communities being marginalized? Where are they being brought in? And we know the answers to some of those. So it has an impact on everyone, even if it's not personally impacting our daily life. The fact that we're in it with others is something that does poke at our resilience a little bit. So yeah, I wanted to just close with those because I think it's really an important thing for us to consider. And I think there'll be more and more attention given to resilience as a way to, I'll use the word heal.
Well, and before we close, if I can just add one more thought. You mentioned the importance of sharing that, and being in the collective. So maybe that blank canvas, as we discussed, maybe we should check in on that in 6 months and see where it's at and if it's ready to be shared with the collective.
You're funny.
Just
Okay.
saying. Maybe we
I'll
can
take
see
that
what we bring
challenge.
forward into the world.
I'll take that challenge.
Well, yeah. So I love that, and it's a good reminder to be play and have fun and create and also use this. There's a lot of opportunity to use our creativity to bring about a greater sense of social justice as well. So it can be our the arts, whether it's music, writing, just sharing free time together in different capacities as a way to express our unity through our differences. I think at a time that it's really obviously maybe a good time for it. So love that. Thank you so much for that. That was a great topic.
Well, I look forward to continuing this series, and please, everyone, like, share, let us know what helps you maintain and build resilience. That one thing that you write in a comment might give someone an idea that makes a huge difference in their life. And we're here to help ourselves and each other make a
And let
difference.
us know what you're working on or what you're sharing with the world out there today. That would be awesome. I'd love to see what folks are doing. We have 2 more episodes. All right. And then we hope to see you there. So, Sat Nam.
Namaste.